Well, what's your job title?
So technically, I'm a PhD student at Georgia Tech.
Technically.
So I went for a little bit of a different path than, data scientist or developer relations or, Python instructor. I still teach a lot, honestly. I still teach on the side. But I've always wanted to go back and do my PhD, but I never knew what in until recently. So it's been a experience.
It's been an experience. Like, what is that?
So like
a good experience?
I was my Fitbit today. I mean, actually, I'm not going to see on the camera, so I guess it doesn't matter. But like sleep-wise, let me see what I did last night. I got 4 hours and 1 minute of sleep. I had a 58 sleep rating and poor sleep. It's not usually that bad, but it's a lot, but it's probably the most fun I've had, which normally PhD students are not super happy.
So what's the end goal? Like, is there a specific job you have in mind, or?
So for me, it's more like a lifelong thing I want to do. But what I've also discovered in my time in industry is that I have a very, very wide skill set, like extremely wide, right? I get job offers from startups all the time, and including this week, ironically. But the problem with me is I was so wide because I did a lot of different things. I've taught, I've been a data scientist at, some like research institutions. I've made YouTube videos, LinkedIn Learning, like you. It's been a whole thing, but the one thing I've realized is that a lot of companies, because I have such an online presence, or did at least, they'd like me for like marketing roles, and my trajectory really was, VP of marketing or, head of developer relations or, something like that, right? Because a lot of stuff I like to do, I want to be public, right?
Right.
But then I also thought about like long term, I do like, sharing work, publicly, but maybe I can try a different way of sharing. Maybe I do some research and then, publish it. I still have a lot of papers. I could probably bring my Google Scholar in the, comments or whatever if people want, but I just want to try a different way of sharing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way to explain it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause that's what I have noticed as far as like the social media landscape goes, is that me and John Poller were actually talking about this. He's the chief revenue officer of Maven Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be like a person who's looking for a job, makes LinkedIn posts, gets traction, becomes an influencer, gets said job, then quits said job after a year. And then like, it's like this whole like circular thing to where they're not, I don't know, there seems to be a pretty big chasm between those who are popular online and those who are doing really good work. Like there's not, like if you're an analytics manager, or you're like high up, or you're doing like, really cool, like senior data roles, you're not on LinkedIn all the time. You're doing the work.
Yeah, that's basically how it is. It's also the what got you traction online is not necessarily will get you traction at a job, right? Because if you're doing things online, typically you're not always selling something. You're doing typically for free or nearly free. Like YouTube ad revenue is not going to like, get you everything, right? Especially if it's like something specialized, like getting a job or teaching Python. You can, make good money. Some people really do, but there's easier ways to make money, I guess is the best way to kind of explain that.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's definitely easier ways to make money, like definitely easier ways. But if you get hired for a job at like, some company and part of your job is to evangelize the company, like share their work or whatever, you're selling a product. You're not actually doing the same thing that you were doing when you're making content, right?
Right.
It's inherently different.
Yeah. Well, so I guess another thing that I have going on is I joined a analytics career services program.
Mm-hmm.
So the former VP of analytics at Nielsen, his name's Solomon Khan, and he started it's called Top Data People. Mm-hmm. And it's a curriculum. So I'm like watching videos and like kind of, he's distilled some of his advice as far as navigating your career and the politics of it is very different than here's how you push this button on Tableau or Power BI or code in Python. Those are two separate things. They're interrelated because you need to be at least over a certain technical threshold to be like in the conversation. But a lot of people who are really good at the technical stuff, it's, you know, people and systems and organizations are a lot more complex than, you know, coding and tools and languages.
You know, I really wish people taught that in school.
Yeah.
So I was giving a lecture today, and that's partially why I got like 4 hours of sleep. I was making a lecture last night. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Students are great. But one thing that I didn't think students realize before talking today is that at a company, right, you have to get access to data. And a bigger company, especially the bigger companies, you have to be friendly with people to get people to, you know, send you data or give you access to data or databases in a timely manner, right? At big places, there's always, and even small places, there's more work than people. So part of life is being friendly enough so that people actually answer your requests.
Right.
You know, if no one wants to work with someone that's unpleasant, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, in a past life, when I was coming out of undergrad, I went directly into 100% commission sales. So I was knocking on doors trying to sell insurance and getting rejected 20 times a day, every day. And then like figuring out how to, you know, they say no, and then you handle that objection, and then turn it into another conversation and then maybe get the yes. There's an art to that I think a lot of technical people, they just assume like, if I'm really good at this, I'm going to have a good career. And it's like, yeah, maybe like you might really be good at Python, but you're an asshole and no one wants to be around you. So they're going to get you out. Well, it's funny because like I was talking to somebody who was in a hiring position, and this person was way overqualified for the job, but then, you know, they wanted specifically to be in Greensboro because they were close to their kids or whatever. And then they passed them to the next round of the interviews, and it was a hard no. And it was interesting because it was like a guy who was an industry veteran within a certain space. But then when he was interviewed by a woman, I think he probably said something like, "Oh, don't you worry, honey," or "Don't worry about that, sugar." Like, and it was like, oh, you think you're better than her, and also you've got like this kind of old school mentality. That's a hard no, even though he was like well overqualified for the job.
And that happens a lot, right? It's not uncommon.
Right. So like, I guess just being aware. I mean, also too, with that anecdote in particular, there's also kind of a generational vibe. Like, you know, like being in a traditional business where it's like you sell a physical product. I think there's kind of like a boys culture or a boys club, you know? So like I think that is changing.